This is a recording of Howard Shaffer of 2005 South Pennsylvania Avenue in Lansing, Michigan. Howard's phone number here in Lansing is 484-7563. Howard is in the process of moving to a new address, Route 5, Box 236C in Johnson City, Tennessee, 37601. Howard's phone number in Tennessee will be area code 615-543-7380. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center in Lansing on October 11th, 1989. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Okay, Howard, if we could just start with your name and your address and your phone number, if you would, please.
I'm Howard Shaffer. My address at present is 2005 South Pennsylvania Avenue in Lansing. Phone number is 484-7563.
Okay. Now, are you moving from your address, or are you planning on staying there?
We're in the process of moving, and we'll
Okay.
be moving to eastern Tennessee.
Have you got a place down there
Yes,
yet, Howard?
and I'll give you the address and
Okay.
phone number there if you
Good.
like.
Yeah, would, please. Thank you.
The address is Route 5, Box 236-C, Johnson City, Tennessee, zip 37601.
Okay.
Phone number is area 615-543-7380.
Okay, that's great. That's great. When will you be going? What are your plans?
Well, we've been spending our winters down there
I
for
see.
a number of years,
All right.
and our permanent move will be determined by when we sell our house, which
All
we're
right.
trying to do.
Okay. Well, then, perhaps, Howard, if you could just take us back to when you started working at Oldsmobile and what was happening and who you were working with and the kinds of things which were going on.
Okay, we'll go back to 1932 when I graduated from Old Lansing Central High School.
All right.
And you'll recall that that was right at the bottom of the Depression, and no one could even buy any kind of a job.
Okay.
I had my application in for General Motors Institute, and it came in the fall of 1932, and I hadn't heard from the application, so I went back to high school and took some postgraduate work
Oh, neat.
to buy some time. About a month later, I was informed that my application to GMI was accepted, and so that's how my career began. I reported down to Oldsmobile, which was my cooperating division, and went through the admission procedures, and
Okay.
I was assigned to what then was called Section B. So I worked the first month and then went to school the second month.
Now, that was fall of 32?
Fall of 1932.
Okay.
October 3 to be exact.
All right. All right.
And
where were the people that you interviewed with at the plant? What part of the plant were they in?
well, the coordinator for the GM Tech students at that time was a man by the name of Brophy.
Okay.
I don't recall his first name.
That's all right.
And of course, he was the one that interviewed me
Okay.
first. And then they assigned me to a place in the plant,
Yeah.
which was in Building 40 in tool and die design.
Okay.
That whole activity was headed up at that time by Everett Layton.
So your first work experience went right out into the tool?
That's right.
Design group.
Al Miller was the personnel manager, I think they called him at that time. And he walked me out into the plant my first day here.
Yeah.
Took me into Building 40 and turned me over to Jack Toman, who was my first boss.
Okay. Now, was that up on the second floor of 40?
Second floor, 40 down on the south end of the building.
Well, what was Building 40? Can you remember what Building 40 was like?
Very vividly, yes. The building had in the length of the building, there were 3 wells in the floor.
All right.
There were railings around them. You could look right down into the first floor. And those openings were subsequently covered over just before World War II.
Okay.
The environment was very shop-like rather than office or drafting room-like. We had the old wood block floors.
Oh my goodness.
And the lighting was individual incandescent lights hanging from above. Each one had its own pull cord, so we had to turn on our lights manually, individually, and turn them off. There was a little tag at the end of each cord reminding people to turn the lights off. So he turned me over to Jack Toman. And Jack Toman was a very spicy type of character.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard much about Jack Toman.
I've heard nothing about it.
He was directly in charge of the tool and die designing departments, which were combined at that time.
All right.
Subsequently, they were separated.
Mm-hmm.
And he assigned me to work in the tool design blueprint room, along with a man by the name of Charlie Blades.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So there's a direct link between the present moment and the man who was the original blacksmith that forged the original axle in the first Oldsmobile. He was a blacksmith by trade, and at the time I came in, he was sort of out to pasture, and they had him running this blueprint room.
Okay.
We had an old Pease blueprint machine that was quite an antique. Had 3 big arc lamps in it, and we fed the blueprint paper in over a table that went down underneath a semi-cylindrical glass that passed underneath these 3 arc lamps. And you'd feed the blueprint paper in there, and then there would be a person on the exit side of the machine cutting off the prints as they emerged from the machine and separating the tracings.
Oh yeah.
And
then the paper would go some.
then the person cutting off the paper would have to manually feed it through 3 baths. First a water bath, then a potash bath, and then another water rinse bath, and then fold it up and put it through a wringer, a hand-operated wringer, and then through an electric mangle, which would dry it.
Oh my
And in the
goodness.
process of the wetting and the drying, the print became very, very unstable. Dimensionally, it was distorted and wrinkled and everything else, but that's the way we used to make blueprints. And then we used to have to periodically take those big arc lamps all apart and clean them up and put new carbons in them.
Oh my goodness. How did you start the carbon lamps? Do you remember how, did they start by themselves?
They started by themselves. There was some kind of a mechanism in there that adjusted them to the proper arc width, yeah.
Okay.
Arc length, I should say.
With Charlie Blades there, and of course you were very young, but did you have any discussions with him about the early days that you could share?
No, that's an interesting question, but at my age,
Yeah.
I wasn't turned on by the historical aspects of the man I was working with until too late, you see. And but he was a very interesting character himself, and Oldsmobile got a lot of publicity or public relations mileage out of him before they finally retired him.
Yeah.
Actually, in the deal in which was negotiated between R.E. Olds and the founders of the General Motors Corporation, in which R.E. Olds sold Oldsmobile to the then developing General Motors Corporation. One of the clauses that he had put in there was that Charlie Blades was to be guaranteed a lifetime job. And so it was well into World War II, and Charlie was in his late 70s, I'm sure, maybe close to 80, when they finally convinced him to stay home because it was for his own safety, and you know, and he climbed those stairs up the building, up the second floor of Building 40 every day until the final day he was there, he had a real good sense of humor, and he would. Maybe I shouldn't go into detail on it, but one of the things I can't help but recall is the fact that the guys used to like to tease him. You know, they'd come down to the window. This was a big cage, and they'd bang on the shelf there by the window to get quick attention. He was busy running the blueprint room, you know, or blueprint machine, and they'd try to get him flustered, and usually they could succeed after a while too. But he'd chew tobacco, and when he'd start getting flustered, that started leaking out. And there was a few stains on some of the drawings from that. And that he had some spicy comments to him too. He wore his glasses way down on the end of his nose. He was a very picturesque character.
Was he a big man? Or?
No, he was a very small man, short and slim.
Well, that's an interesting experience with a man that had been there for so long. Did he stay there in that area generally until he finally left?
Yes. I can't remember at what point he was taken out of the blueprint room, but it would have probably been right around 1940.
Okay.
Then he was assigned he was given a little office at the head of the stairs, and he was sort of a receptionist.
Oh.
Any vendors or visitors that would come into the tool and die design area, he would escort them to whoever they wanted to see.
Howard, what else was it when you first came? What else was in the Building 40? Can you remember the other kinds of activities that were going on there?
On the second floor, besides tool and die design, there was a time study department, or standards department, if you will.
Were they on one of the sides or something?
No, they were right next to the tool and die design. They were just the next group north.
All right.
The tool and die design on the east side of the building.
All right.
Opposite them on the west side of the building was the stores division under Sam Montgomery.
All right.
Frank Trainer was in charge of standards.
Okay.
And the stores department went quite a ways north on the west side of the building, and in the far end of the building was the cafeteria.
That's in the north end of the
In the north end of the building was the cafeteria, under a man by, they called him Cap Boyles.
Oh.
He was a colorful character too. Later, that area was converted into the metallurgical lab under Frank Netherley.
Okay. Did the cafeteria serve all the people in that plant, or was that just for building?
That was the only cafeteria in the plant, as I recall. Yes.
Okay. And then what was along the other side of the building as you went north, if the stores were on the other side?
After you, progressing along the east side to the north, after you left the standards department, I'm having a problem remembering what was in that area now.
Okay.
Between there and the cafeteria. I know they didn't take up that whole.
Was the plant engineering organization or those kinds of groups in that building at that time?
They surely would have been. And I shouldn't overlook the plant layout department too,
Okay.
which was in just next to tool and die design,
All right.
and in the center of the building between time study on the east and stores on the west.
They were on one of these walk across sort of things that.
Well, it was these tool and die design and plant layout were all in the south end, south of the farthest south.
First open.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
There must have been some kind of a storage area in the center of the building, centrally located between the north and south ends.
Yeah, all right.
I'm having trouble remembering.
That's all right, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So. What, did the opening itself, the openings that were in the building there, did they create any unique happenings, so to speak?
Not happenings as I recall, but down in the tool room, adjacent to the tool room was the tool room heat treat.
Okay, yeah.
And that used to put out a lot of smoke,
Oh,
and it
all right.
circulated throughout the whole building, and that great big hole being there, the smoke rose from the tool room right up into tool and die design, and we had a pretty smoky atmosphere quite a lot of the time.
How did you ever keep drawings clean?
We didn't.
Oh.
They didn't keep clean. The guys, the draftsmen would do the best they could, but I'm sure that they got grimy as a result of that.
Yeah.
That was a big relief when they finally floored over those openings,
Yeah.
and did away with the wood block floor and put a couple inches of concrete
Oh, yeah.
over the original floor,
Yeah.
and then tiled it.
Uh-huh.
That was right, just going into World War II
Okay.
when they did that.
Was the ceiling all open too?
The ceiling was all open. It was that what they call a monitor type roof,
Okay.
and the building is still that way, but
Yeah.
but there's a lot of space now. I think that space up in there, last I knew, was pretty much occupied by the air conditioning.
Right. Right. So you didn't have any air conditioning, so to speak?
No, our air conditioning consisted of opening and closing the windows.
Okay, so you did do all that in the summer
Yeah.
when it got hot?
Yeah, and that used to be a source of problems from time to time too. No two people could agree on what was properly air conditioned.
Right.
Oh, and another thing I remember back in those days, there was a lot of people chew tobacco and smoke and so on the
Okay.
job, and it was part of the janitor's responsibility to clean and maintain the spittoon.
Uh-oh.
That wasn't one of the more pleasant aspects of the work either.
Were those, everybody have one, so to speak?
No, they were on request, anybody that
Okay.
needed one.
But there were a lot of them around?
Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
and some of the guys weren't too neat about how they
were missing?
Right.
Jeez. That must have turned into kind of a mess.
Every once in a while you'd hear a clang and a pencil would drop into
Yeah. In that soup.
That was just an accepted part of the scene.
Any ladies in the workplace at that time, Howard, that you can remember?
Yes, when I first arrived, there were a few stenographers,
Okay.
lady stenographers. Then there was a period during which they removed all women from inside of the plant gates. So they did away with the lady stenographers and replaced them with men.
Really?
This was before World War II.
Why was that done?
I don't know whether it was for insurance reasons or I really don't know what the reason was.
Okay.
But they've transferred these ladies into stenographic and secretarial positions over in the engineering building or in the administration.
Interesting.
You remember Catherine Condon?
The name only.
She was one of those that was transferred out that way. In the Nethaway, Beatrice Nethaway.
Well, we got off subject a little bit, but now you were, as a GMI student, you bounced back and forth every 4 weeks or
Yeah.
some period of time anyway.
Yeah, we were on 4-week.
Did you spend all of your working time then in the tool and die design?
No, that's a good question.
All right.
During my second year, I was assigned in order to broaden my work experience.
Sure.
I was assigned downstairs in the tool room heat treat for a time.
All right.
And then I worked for another length of time in the die room over in Building 56.
Do you remember any of the people's names that were down there?
In the tool room heat treat, that was under the supervision of a man by the name of Ray Springer.
Okay. He was the foreman?
Yeah.
Okay. That would have been like 1933, maybe, a year later?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I had an interesting few months working there.
Okay. What were you actually just loading furniture? What were you doing?
Well, any kind of a flunky job that they had, yeah, I would charge material into the work material into the furnaces. I wasn't allowed to quench the steel when they take it out. I wasn't skilled enough to do that. I used to have to remove the work from the cyanide or the carburizing pots. We had to pack for carburized steel.
Okay.
We had to pack into these pots with this carburizing material, coke-like stuff, and then seal it over with fire clay. I used to have to do that,
Right.
and then when they'd come out of the furnace and cool, and I had to take and empty those carburizing pots, and then occasionally I'd have to run the material through a sifter so that it could be recycled, taking the scale out of it. That was a dirty job. Wow. I used to take it out take this equipment out on the dock there on the east side of Building 40, where the railroad siding came in. Dusty, old boy, it was a terrible job. And we had 2 blacksmiths in there. Some of their work was manual, and they also had 2 air hammers, air-operated blacksmith hammers, and occasionally on their manual work, where they'd have to have some heavier striking done, then I'd get enlisted into that. I'd have to swing a sledgehammer they'd hold the workpiece and the tongs with one hand and their tool with the other hand, and then I was the third hand. I'd have to strike the tool with the sledgehammer.
And not miss.
Yes, and not miss. And I wasn't all that well coordinated, and one time I did miss.
Oh my
And I missed real good, and the hammer head came to rest on the big toenail.
Oh.
And that, well, to say the least, I smashed that toe in pretty good shape. I went over to first aid over in the press plant, and they drilled a hole in the toenail to let some blood out.
Yeah.
And a few months later, over in Flint, it was in the late spring, and I went out to a public swimming beach with some guys. It wasn't really a beach; it was a big swimming hole.
Yeah.
In the Flint River, and I was diving off the side of the bank, and the toenail came off, and I hit my toe on the bank on the way in the water.
Oh, goodness.
Boy, that toe turned black and blue
Oh, I
and
can
swelled
imagine.
up in no time. We didn't have safety shoes then
Yeah.
either.
Did you wear safety glasses? People wear glasses?
Yes, we did. We did have safety glasses. They were quite crude, and they wasn't. It wasn't really impressed on people too strongly the importance of wearing them. So
All right.
it was pretty much optional. Whether
It
you
wasn't a
wore them.
mandatory thing.
No.
You did not have to
Right.
wear it.
Right.
Well, okay, now as you moved along your GMI experiences, what other things kind of transpired?
I'm thinking of a couple things that would be environmentally related too back in those days. The big old smokestack and the big whistle that came off of I was told it came off of a lake freighter years and years back. That whistle was very prominent in the city of Lansing. People used to set their clocks and run their schedules by that whistle. And in the evening at 9 o'clock, they blew it at 9 o'clock for a curfew.
Really?
The kids were supposed to be off the street at that time.
Interesting. Where was the whistle located?
It was on the powerhouse.
Right there in the corner sort of Olds Avenue and Division Street, but Elm Street and Division?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Where the big
Where
stack
the big
was.
stack was.
What other times did they blow it? Shifts?
Oh, they'd blow it in the morning for at I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, I guess,
Okay.
for the day shift to start.
All right.
And they would blow it at 5 o'clock for the shift, for the end of the shift.
Okay.
And most of that time there was only one shift.
Yeah.
Back in those days.
Yeah.
Later on, there were 2 shifts added. Another thing I recall that I think is worth mentioning was we're going along now, recalling that when I started in, it was at the low point of the
Right.
Depression. The year 1932, the 1932 model had already gone out of production long before I came in the fall.
All right.
I was told that they built something like 19,000 total cars that
All
year.
right.
And so the plant was completely dead months before I came into the plant. And President Roosevelt had convinced the country that if we were going to get out of the Depression, everybody that had any money at all stashed away better start putting that money to use. And he convinced the automotive industry to pour everything that they possibly could into the development of a model to be brought out in 1933 that the people that had any money at all wouldn't be able to resist. It had to be a big improvement over anything up to that point. And so when I came in on the scene, they were into the engineering program to bring out the 1933 models.
Okay.
And tool and die design was really busy on developing the tooling for that model. And I thought, you know, my work allowed me to go out into the shop, and it was just like a morgue all over the whole plant. It just didn't seem like anything was ever going to get started. And I remember when they invited all the employees then working over to Building 34, where the product engineering department was at that time.
Okay.
And on the first floor, the ground floor of Building 34 was the engineering shop, the build-up shop, the machine shop. And they had on display 2 handmade 1933 models, a 6-cylinder and an 8-cylinder car. And they invited the employees to go over and look at those cars. And I thought, hey, that's got to be the final thing. They can't improve on those things. It was the style-wise, it was out of this world, I thought.
Okay, we're back up.
Well, we had our problems getting into production on the 1933 models, predictably.
Sure.
And one of the problems that I recall that affected us in tool and die design very, very much was the breakdown of one of the dies in the manufacturing process for the 8-cylinder radiator grill.
Okay.
This grill was made of sheet brass, or heavy gauge sheet brass, and it had a sort of a herringbone design of louvers, and the lance die that cut these louvers broke, and it threatened to shut down the whole production. And they found that they could, by the use of files and hand tools, they could keep this thing going. So they just enlisted anybody that wanted to work down in the tool room, an unlimited number of hours. You work as many hours as you want, filing on these radiator grills, and straight time.
Yeah.
There was no premium time, premium pay. So the guys, all the people in the office people and the designers, the draftsmen, went down there and worked on that project for several weeks. It took them to get that die back in operation, it seemed like to me, and with files.
So that's how we kept the line going.
That's how they kept the line going. Right.
Interesting. So problems aren't a new problem. There's nothing.
No,
It's still had problems.
No, that's right. Another thing that happened during that Depression period, after they got the 33 model into production, then the tool and die design activities became quite seasonal, and they used to transfer the tool and die designers back and forth between the die room and tool room and the design department. And at one time, they got to the point where they didn't have enough work to go around in either activity, and they still didn't want to lay the people off, so they put them to work out in the yard, working under maintenance, painting and doing anything they could to keep the buildings in shape. He never could get away with anything like that nowadays. But that's the way they kept things going.
Were things still pretty dead in 33, Howard, as far as, I mean, we only ran a short period of time again?
No. I think, as I recall, when they got the 33 models into production, and this was industry-wide, I think it took off, well, comparatively speaking, in pretty good shape, as to, compared to what it was when they discontinued production at the end of the 32 model round.
Okay. Did you get caught up in any of those layoff things that happened in the 30s?
I didn't actually get laid off, but there were periods when we were on short hours, like 2-3 days a week.
Oh, really?
Working 2-3 days a week, yeah.
Would you know?
This was when I was first married and just starting to raise a family.
Would you know ahead of time what was going to happen, or was it just on a daily basis that they told you?
I don't remember whether we got much advance notice or not. I think people, probably could see the handwriting on the wall if they weren't officially notified.
Yeah. Do you remember what you started out at as a student? Rate?
Yes, 36 cents an hour.
36 cents an hour. How about that?
I'll never forget when, after I graduated and I was assigned to the Oldsmobile Tool and Die Design, and then I was assigned as a clerk.
Okay.
And I worked as a clerk for some time, and then I became a detailer on the drawing board, and started working gradually into designing. And I remember when my rate reached $1 an hour, boy, I thought I really had made that.
All relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, as you went through the GMI process, then how long did that program take at that time? Then was that
the program that I was on terminated in 2 years.
It was a 2-year program.
Yeah.
All right. And so you got out in what?
34.
34. Okay.
In the summer of 34.
Okay. And then went into the tool and die room as a full-time
Tool and die design.
Tool and die design as a full-time position.
Yeah.
Okay. Still in Building 40.
Right.
Okay.
Then there came a time, I recall, when I had to go back to work in the tool room because of things getting kind of caught up for a period there in design. I worked in the tool room under Rube Shipman, running a lathe.
Oh, okay. Okay. What, as the products sort of changed there in the 30s, can you remember some of the things, some of the bigger changes that may have happened that you had to work on?
The biggest single thing that stands out in my mind, of course, is World War II.
All right.
Moving into that and converting into it, and then at the end of the war, converting back to automotive.
Okay.
I was frozen on my job during World War II.
Okay.
Because this work was considered essential war work, and our Oldsmobile's record during World War II is well documented.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what did you end up having to do yourself during the war?
I had to design tooling for the ordnance materials that we were producing.
What kinds of things do you remember that you were working on? What kinds of guns or shells or?
Of course, we had our first contract was the 20 millimeter automatic aircraft cannon.
All right.
Then the larger caliber tank cannon, 75 and 90 millimeter tank cannon, and the shells that were designed were used with those. And I had tool designing work on all those products.
All right. Did you have to get out of the shop much at that
Oh
time?
yes, oh yes. All of my work, all through my whole career, involved a lot of work back and forth with the shop.
All right.
And I take a lot of satisfaction in that. The fact that I had to work both ends of it.
Can you remember where where was the press shop in 33, 4, and 5, and that sort of time frame?
Building 56 was erected, I think, in about 1928 or 30, somewhere in there. And the press plant was in Building 56.
56 or 52?
I'm sorry, it was 52.
Okay.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
Yeah, that's all right.
And the die room was in the east end, the extreme east end of Building 52.
Okay.
And the remainder of the building was press plant.
All right.
Then they built Building 50, which was in between 52 and 56.
Yeah.
And that incorporated the big fender presses.
Okay.
Then later on,
34 at all this time was still product engineering?
yes,
Okay.
the product engineering, Building 64 was built I'm getting my numbers mixed up. Building 36 was built in 1936.
Okay.
And product engineering moved into that building. That was built for product engineering.
Over on the other side of Building 40, right?
No, over on Olds Avenue.
Oh, okay, you're thinking 64 out there.
I said 64 and then I changed it to 36.
Right. You're okay, yeah.
But it was built in 36.
Okay.
They moved into that in the fall of 36.
It left the old Building 34 area, moved
Right.
out of the plant
Right.
side.
And Building 34 then became manufacturing area.
All right. Okay.
Um,
Well, did you have anything, Howard, as far as plant side? Did you get out into where we did painting and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Where were we doing those kinds of things?
Well, the paint department was at the west end of Building 27B, was it?
Yeah, probably. That's 27A or B, one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
So it was in that, it was a 3-story building. Do you remember whether that was in that 3-story building?
Yeah.
Or was it,
Yeah. And while I was going back, when I was a tech student, I had one of my coordination reports.
Okay.
I had to write on the bonderizing process.
Oh, all right.
For the painted panels.
Did we have those big dip tanks
Yeah.
at that time,
Yeah.
the priming tanks?
Right. Let's see, I'm kind of running down now.
Howard, when you came, were any of the old original buildings that had been built still there?
Oh yes, oh yes. All of them, as far as I know. Even the old Seeger Engine Works.
That building was
That
there?
was still there.
The one with the sawtooth, the big sawtooth?
Yeah, and it was used for storage for plant engineering,
All right.
plant maintenance.
Uh-huh.
And the old, we stored our wood patterns in one of the old original buildings,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
over by the powerhouse.
Okay.
And then, of course, the complex up west of Division Street, where Fisher Body was still in along Olds Avenue there.
All right.
At the time I started.
Did you ever get up into any of their buildings?
Oh yes, not too much into Fisher Body itself, but you know, at the end of the Fisher Body line, which was around the corner into Building 21, I think it was. the Fisher body line abruptly ended, and the Olds final assembly line started at that point.
Okay.
And of course, Olds Avenue back in those days was still Isaac Street.
Okay, yeah.
And yes, I vividly remember those buildings and the activities in them.
Did you as a student have to get out into any of those and do any work assignments when you were a student by any chance? Or didn't they shuffle you that far out?
No, I don't, not in connection with work assignments, but that, I was privileged to go out into the plant in the process of gathering material for coordination reports.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And I recall days when General Motors purchased the Durant plant and converted it into Fisher Body and moved Fisher Body over there.
All right.
George Fernster could tell you a lot about
Yeah,
that.
Ed George, he did the same sort of thing with us. So
Yeah,
had
did
a
he?
nice, yeah, had a good.
He'd be a good
Yeah,
man to
yeah.
interview. He goes back farther than I do. Walt Campbell would be another.
Walt has told me he will come over. He just wanted to kind of get his mind set, so to speak,
Yeah.
before he goes away this.
His health is rather fragile
Yeah,
now, too.
yeah. I saw him at one of the retirement things. Well, anyhow, let's see, Howard, the war things. What did we do with all the regular car production stuff during the war?
Okay, the reconversion job was a gradual thing as we took on new contracts.
All right.
They would clear an area in the plant to tool up and equip for the war contract.
All right.
And they would have to store the machinery, the automotive machinery. A lot of it was stored. Some of it, I guess, was sold outright.
Oh, yeah.
Other, I recall, some of the machinery that wasn't useful to us was taken away from us and sent to other plants that could use it for their operations.
All right.
And the conversion process meant an awful lot of physical changes inside the buildings too,
Yeah.
besides the installation of machinery and digging huge pits, you know,
Yeah.
for equipment, machinery that went below the floor level, and providing substantial enough basis for some of the machines.
Okay.
This is where plant engineering was the big activity then.
Yeah. Were you still in Building 40 during the war?
Yes, all through the war.
Could you wander around any place in the plant during the war, or,
Oh, yes.
or was there restrictions to what people could do?
No. The only place that was restricted, as I recall, was the underground test firing range, where they test fired the 20 millimeter, and later on 37 millimeter
Okay.
aircraft.
You just couldn't wander into that?
No. I was fortunate enough to get a couple of 2 or 3 designing assignments that had to do with that, so I had to go down in there to
Did they fire every gun?
yes,
Every gun was?
every gun was test fired. The automatic,
Yeah.
the 20 millimeter and 37 millimeter.
Yeah.
Not the tank
Not the
cannon.
big ones.
No.
Yeah.
Now, on the tank cannon, we made the principal parts, the tube, and the breech ring, and the breech block.
Okay. Didn't really make a full gun.
No.
Like apparently we did on the 20 and 37.
That's
It was
correct.
A full operating gun.
That's correct. And of course, during the war, the automotive transport trucks were converted to transport the big wood boxes that contained the tube or the assemblies to the ordnance plants that took them from there.
Okay.
These trucks were utilized during the war for that purpose.
Did you find, I'll back up a little bit, During the 30s, when you would go out in the plant itself, in the working side of the plant, did you find very many ladies out there
No.
in the plant at all?
No, there were no ladies until, as I recall, it was World War II that brought the ladies into the manufacturing area.
So then there was kind of a significant change
Right.
there.
As I recall, there were no ladies in the plant at all until the manpower situation became such that it was expedient to put ladies on the workforce during the war.
Okay. Well, now when you got through the war, Howard, the war ended, and then what kind of happened? What did you end up having to do?
Well, then came the big reconversion program to convert back to automotive production. Now this was quite a bit different from the reconversion program in the beginning, which, as I said, was quite gradual as we took on new contracts.
Yes.
When we reconverted to automotive production, it had all been done, in one big operation,
Okay.
and it was staggering in its proportions. It was huge. We used to say, "Hey, I don't think there's a dime's worth of original real estate around this plant anymore."
So
And-
you just really turned it upside down.
Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
getting all the machinery, placed into. Of course, they took advantage of that in some ways by rearranging the plant into a more efficient operating arrangement, and getting all this machinery set into place, and buying a lot of new machinery, and getting back machinery that had been loaned out to other industries.
Sure. Was a heavy overtime sort of situation, or how?
Oh yes, yeah, there was a lot of overtime.
Big push to get done, so to speak.
Certainly, the automotive industry became very competitive. Everybody wanted to get back into automotive production as fast as they could, and the original cars, the first cars that got out of the plant, some of them were incomplete. Even there was a period during which we couldn't get the steel to make steel bumpers, so they put them out with wooden bumpers on them.
Oh, really? That was after the war?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And then they had to follow up as steel bumpers became available. They had to follow up and replace those for the owners.
I'm going to jump backwards again a little bit. During the 30s, Howard, there was the union movement, the sit-down strike business and stuff up in the
1937 it began.
Yeah. Can you remember anything of those happenings? What
Yeah.
went on?
Yes. Of course, the center of the union movement was in Flint
Yes.
at Chevrolet, and that's where the big famous sit-down strike occurred.
Okay.
And after that got cleared up, the union activity, of course, rapidly spread to all the rest of the manufacturing divisions, and I recall specifically in the tool and die design area, we were hourly rated people.
All right.
And our rate was, at that time, had gotten up to something like 84 cents an hour, I think. And management, in an effort to stave off unionizing the design departments, had a factory sponsored. They didn't call it a union. It's an employee organization or something, comparable to a union, but it was sponsored by management.
Interesting.
And consequently was dominated and influenced by management. And that didn't set well with the workers. I recall a meeting that that was called at the end of our workday. By the way, they didn't have these meetings during working hours. They called a meeting up in the old cafeteria in the north end of Building 40 after work one particular day to tell us why they couldn't grant our request through this company union for a wage increase, because it would put Oldsmobile all out of line with the rest of the industry. And it wasn't a few months after that the union began to make inroads into the designing departments, the tool and die design departments, and then we did get an increase. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it without the union, and did it with the union. Now, during my career, I sat on both sides of the table at various times, as you know, and so I have first-hand experience at both sides, both ends of it. And for a long time, I refused to give any consideration to joining a union.
Oh, could you do that?
Oh yes, for a while.
It was
for a while.
voluntary.
Eventually, it became
All right.
through negotiated contracts. It became a union shop, including our activities. So we had to go into the union. But I'm not the union hater that I once was. And I'm not the union flag waver that well, I never was really a union flag waver, but I fully cooperated for a time.
Sure.
And I walked the picket line during the big strike in 1945.
Oh, okay.
For a time. Yeah.
Did the guys in the 30s, after the union came to pass and it was voluntary, did you reap the benefits, the non-union guys, of the union efforts also?
Yes, as I recall, I think we did, yeah.
You got the raises that they had negotiated,
And
so it was across the board sort of
Right,
thing.
and that created a lot of bitterness too, because the tool room and die room were fully unionized before we were. And there used to be quite a bit of resentment on the part of those fellows between those fellows and us, because there was a lot of, as I've mentioned before, there was a lot of transferring back and forth between the die design and the tool design and the tool room and die room. And so the guys from the design, when they get transferred down in the tool and die room, they weren't too popular, for that reason. And because it was a funny thing, the tool room and die room were unionized, and still management, I guess, in an effort to discourage the design groups from becoming unionized, they made sure that our wages were kept a little higher than the wages in the tool room and die room. So that was more cause for resentment when the guys get transferred into the tool room and die room. And that went on for a while too.
Did in those early days, did any of those strike kinds of things happen at Oldsmobile as a follow-up to the stuff that was going on up in Flint? Did the plant have to shut down for any of that kind of thing?
Oh yes. During the 1937 sit-down strike, as I recall, I could be wrong on this, but I think certain of the components that we used were shut off, and I think it did affect Oldsmobile production.
But we didn't strike ourselves, so to speak?
No, I don't think so. I got to excuse me. We were talking about
the 37.
About the 37 strike picture, yeah. Now my memory on the details of that is pretty hazy right now.
All right. You mentioned you had to walk the picket line in the 45 thing.
Yes.
That was a big sort of strike, because
Well, yes, the strike started at Thanksgiving time in 45, and it continued until March of 46.
Long time.
Yeah. in my particular case, I did picket duty for a while, and then I I was able to get some work in designing work in some of the job shops around town. And well, specifically it was Olofsson.
Oh, okay.
When they were up in the old Geyer plant in the north end of town, they were tooling up a new heater. So they hired some of us fellows to design the dies for that.
Okay.
We finished up that program just about holiday time, Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
And my family fell ill at that time to the flu. So I decided we had never had an opportunity to do any traveling. So I decided that when they got well enough to get on their feet, I was gonna get us down into the sunny part of the country, so we could see if we could break some of the germs out. And I got a loan from my dad and bought a new house trailer, because at that time most of the house trailers were built in this part of the country, and they were in demand in the south.
Oh yeah.
And people were able to buy a house trailer here and sell it at a profit down in the south.
Okay.
So I borrowed some money from my dad and bought a trailer, pulled it down into the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and took my kids out of school, and we were away for 6 weeks on that trip. And I sold it down in Texas before I came home, and sold it at a profit after using it for 6 weeks.
Yeah. So it did work. Yeah. Did you didn't have to report for strike?
Well,
and all that kind of stuff?
they made it sound pretty threatening, and you know the consequences if you didn't do picket duty. But people began to challenge that, and the people that were in a position to do other things, as I happened to be, and so I just quit the picket line and went about my own interests.
Anything happened on the picket line, Howard, that you remember while you were there?
No, I was assigned to an area, and it was a night shift job that I had. And we were stationed on the west side of Building 68 there at Olds Avenue.
Okay, yeah.
We used to have to go down under the bridge and walk the railroad, walk back and forth on the railroad and make sure nobody was getting into the plant via the railroad entrances, and in or out. And they'd bring coffee and donuts around, you know. We had a
Shaffer, who currently lives in Lansing, but is moving to Johnson City, Tennessee. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on October 11th, 1989. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes. Back up. Did the strike ended eventually? Were people getting ready for it to end, so to speak? Were tired of it, or?
Of course, everybody kept very close track of the negotiating process. It was in the news all the time. And, and for some time before the actual end of the strike, it became pretty obvious that things were getting cleared up, and I was still down south at the time, and I thought, well, I guess I'd better be getting back to the north because I don't want to miss out and go back to work.
Right.
And I guess I was back about a week before the strike ended and went back to work.
At some point in time, you guys must have ended off of getting off of the hourly kinds of assignment and into a salary kind of assignment. Howard, when did all that happen?
Department-wise, it never did happen.
No, but you, personally.
I was transferred, my job assignment was transferred. I was on a job which was called stock sheets.
All right.
I used to have to develop the blanks, sheet metal blanks, an estimated blank development, and then I had to lay them out for the most economical use of the material.
All right.
And
sort of like a puzzle.
Right. And I, in carrying out my responsibilities, the various responsibilities I had on that job, I became more and more frequently involved with salaried people.
Okay.
And so Russ Hansen was in charge of the production engineering at that time.
Okay.
And I was able to convince Russ that in order to best carry out my responsibilities, it became quite important that I be on the same kind of a footing with the people that I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And so he acceded to my suggestions and put me on salary.
Right.
That particular job.
All right. That would have been about when?
That was right around 1950.
All right.
I think maybe it was in 1950.
Okay.
Then I went from that job eventually into other salaried jobs. For a couple of years I was assigned to expediting dies out on the road, calling on various die shops that were building dies for Oldsmobile, checking on progress and negotiating costs for engineering changes and sort of liaison between the plant and the die shops.
Well, was that a kind of the follow-up sort of thing in getting dies on time? Was that a problem in those days?
Oh yes. Always has been and always will be, probably.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, there were during the die building process, there would always be engineering changes incorporated all along the line.
Part changes. The
parts would change. We'd have to incorporate changes into the dies to take care of those, and then I would have to negotiate the costs with the vendors, and they used to try to really stick it to us.
It was sort of I got you one, wasn't it?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I had a lot of interesting experiences in connection with that.
Who were some of the people the companies we were dealing with in those days, Howard?
We had, most of our die work was distributed around the shops in Detroit.
All right.
We had 4 or 5 in Grand Rapids. We had 2 or 3 in Toledo, and some in Flint.
Okay.
The big dies were, our fender dies were City Machine and Tool in Toledo.
Okay.
And then Kessel and Tool and Die in Detroit handled a lot of the big dies. Richard Brothers, which they had their main plant in Detroit. They also had a die plant in Hillsdale. And I used to have to call on both plants there. And,
are those people still in business?
no. I don't think any of them are now.
Yeah, they're
I think they're all been phased out. Oh, I was just thinking just the other day, I was trying to remember the names of some of the names of all of the places that I dealt with, and I came up with about, it seems to me, about 30 names of around 30 shops that I used to have to call on. I was out on the road all the time
So that wasn't unusual just to be out and running all?
No. In fact, in Detroit, I'd go down there on Monday, and I'd stay right there until long about Wednesday or Thursday, and then.
So you stayed right in town?
Yeah. And then the balance of the week, I would go to the other localities where there were fewer shops.
Who were you working for at that time?
Russ Hansen.
But directly for Russ?
No, I was under Palmer Gustafson.
Okay, Gus was there.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, I used to have to report directly to Russ.
Okay. Now, Russ had the sheet metal side of the house. He didn't have the machining, did he?
That's correct.
All right.
And Bob Russell replaced him.
Okay.
Tom Downey was manufacturing manager at that time.
But when Russ was there as the sheet metal?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I used to have to...
Did you deal with Tom at all?
Very rarely, but occasionally on certain critical jobs, he would ask me for some direct input.
Good. What kind of a guy was Russ Hansen? Just your impression.
I'd like to address that a little bit too. I think there was somewhat of a clash of personalities between Russ and myself. I always had tremendous respect for Russ Hansen from the standpoint of his technical knowledge of the dye industry.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a very high regard for him as a personnel, as a manager.
Okay.
Personnel.
Yeah.
And he didn't seem to have a whole lot of regard or respect for me. It was a sort of unrequited love, I guess you could say, because I had more respect for him than he did for me.
Yeah.
And we had some kind of some discussions that I don't look back on with
It's all right.
pleasure.
Did you, over those years, Howard, that you were there, did you see what I would call any change in how the management style was done from the 30s to the 50s to the 60s and so forth? How we managed our business, did it change during those years?
Yeah. The emphasis more and more grew away from practical backgrounds to academic backgrounds. There used to be a whole lot more value placed on in management positions on people that had impressive practical backgrounds,
All right.
without the necessity for them having college degrees.
Yeah.
And that changed very, very drastically to the other extreme,
Okay.
in my opinion.
So that was an obvious thing that you could see happening.
Yeah. And I think that continued to move in that direction even after I retired.
Yeah.
Probably still
Yeah.
does.
When did you retire, Howard?
1974,
1970. What? Remember the date?
May the 1st.
May 1st. Okay. How many years was that then in total?
41 years
41.
and 7 months.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think was the most interesting period while you were there then in all that time? When did you have the most fun, so to speak?
Gosh, it's hard for me to sort out any one period, because each period had its own interesting aspects. I think a job that I took the most personal satisfaction in was that expediting job,
Okay.
die follow-up
Yeah.
on the road. I met a lot of interesting people on that job, and my knowledge of the business expanded a lot
Yeah.
as a result of that.
What did you do after that? How long did that particular aspect continue?
Oh, I'd say 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Then I was assigned to process engineering
All right.
work for several years, and then I was moved into the supervising of the die design department,
All right.
and that was the job that I retired from.
Okay. Did that particular, now you're on the opposite side of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah.
Did you find that to have unique problems that
Oh, very
perhaps you
definitely.
hadn't
Very definitely, yeah.
kind of-
Our particular department at that time, we had a committee man in our department. I don't suppose I ought to go into naming names, but he was a very controversial person in his job, and we had some, well, between him and his predecessor, who also was in that department, they practically killed my predecessor on the supervisor job. Yeah, he took a voluntary demotion and went back to an hourly rated job on the drawing board, and they put me in his place.
Yeah.
And the union people took up where they left off with him and trying to do the same thing to me.
Mhm.
Well, it was a very, very difficult period in my career.
Tough relationship.
Very tough, and it took its toll on me too, physically. Ironically, the man that gave me the most trouble we wound up having a personal relationship that in which he respected me.
Interesting.
And when I retired, he was quite emotional about it.
Isn't that interesting?
I tried to be fair as possible, and go the extra mile.
What were most of the problems, Howard? Why were they so?
It was more personality problems than it was problems between union and manual.
All right.
It was personality problems between the committee man and myself.
I see.
I
But it sounds
say
like
personality problems. I can't imagine a person who could have withstood the kind of treatment that I was getting without becoming personally involved. And,
that's a shame. Yeah. See, can you tell me a little bit about Palmer Gustafson? Don't know a thing about it.
Palmer Gustafson went through the Rio Apprentice
Oh,
program, as many of our people did.
All right.
Oldsmobile benefited heavily from the old Rio Apprentice
All right.
program. And Palmer Gustafson was one of those, and he was a die maker when he came to Oldsmobile. He was a die maker.
Oh, all right.
And back in the late 30s, he was taken out of the die room and given some responsibilities in process engineering. And through the evolutionary process, he worked from there into supervisory responsibility.
How did he manage people? Did he do it different than other folks did?
Palmer, how he managed people, I think he had a subtle way about him that wore well with people, and he was able to get results without resorting to drastic measures. His obvious ability in a technical way generated respect for him on the part of the people who worked with him and under him. He was well liked by everybody.
Well, Howard, that's a good recounting of 40-some years there.
Yeah, I think we've pretty well covered the field.
It's a good, long time we spent there. Saw a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
So that's great.
I used to, as everybody did, used to have a great anticipation each year as we were working on them, tooling up for the new models, and then we began to get brief glimpses of the engineering build-up models over there, and we felt quite a lot of satisfaction over the fact that we were able to see what was coming in the future before other people did.
Yeah. Did you see any changes in that working relationship between like the product engineers and the manufacturing engineering people over those years?
There was always a great deal of cooperation. There had to be.
Yeah.
They had to work as two integrated teams.
Yeah.
And because manufacturing methods had to be coordinated with product design. Many things in regard to product design had to be tailored to the ability to manufacture. So a lot of working back and forth had to take place.
Yeah. And that pretty much existed over all those years that you spent there.
Yes. They had the people, by and large, in product engineering had a great respect and a good working relationship with the people in manufacturing and vice versa.
Okay. Well, that's great, Howard. I guess the only thing left is I'll get you to sign off your little release, and we will quit there. See, Howard, you want to mention a little bit about your singing activities at Oldsmobile?
Yes, during Jack Wolfram's administration, an employee activity developed in the form of an employee choral organization, and Dr. David MacTell was who happened at that time to be Jack Wolfram's son-in-law, and a very capable musician, vocal musician, choir director specifically, was given the directorship of this employee choral organization, which became known as the Oldsmobile Rocketeer. And I became involved in that, and I had many very pleasant experiences in the activities connected with the Rocketeers. I became president at one time of the Rocketeers chorus, and working with the outside talent that would be brought in to share with us in our programs that we would do was a lot of great satisfaction. Some of the names of the people that we used to work with, like Florence Henderson.
Oh yes, she's in a lot of our ads.
Yeah. And she was great to work with. We would rehearse for these programs, and then during our last couple of rehearsals, they'd bring in the outside people from New York, and there'd be several rehearsals with them. So we'd get acquainted with them.
Oh, that's great.
And probably the one that stands out in my memory most vividly is the most ambitious production that we did during the whole Rocket Air's history. That was the stage, or the concert version, so to speak, of the opera Aida.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to get one of the solo roles in that,
Oh, my goodness.
in that production. And as such, I had the part of the Egyptian king. Now that's a minor solo role in the opera, but it has to do with one of the major characters in the form of the character called Amneris, who was the daughter of the king of Egypt and the rival of the Aida character herself. And Amneris the role was sung by Mignon Dunn of the New York Metropolitan Opera Company. And here I'm a little bit of an Oldsmobile employee singing to a Metropolitan Opera star, and she's my daughter.
Isn't that interesting?
And we had occasion to meet a couple of times since that, and it's been interesting.
How were those productions picked as to what you would do?
I think pretty much MacTell was the...
He did it?
Yeah, did it. And fortunately, and this had a great amount to do with the success of the activity, was the fact that Jack Wolfram had a personal interest in that form of art.
Did that, after Wolfram died or left, did that change then?
Yes.
Is that when it stopped?
Yes. The next administration didn't share that interest and didn't consider that to be all that valuable an asset, so it died very, very rapidly at that point.
I see. How many people were in that organization, do you remember?
Oh, I'd say at its peak we probably had 60 or 70 voices.
Wow, quite a bunch of folks there.
Yeah. And MacTell did a real fine job in putting together very interesting programs. We had very, very good attendance at our concerts down in the Civic Center and over in Sexton High School auditorium. And I look back with a lot of satisfaction on the experiences I had.
Yeah. Well, it's a unique bit of history.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist anymore.
No?
Okay.
That pretty well sums that up.
All right.